Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. They reached the fence before sunset, and I was ready and waiting. My name is Rowan Briggs. 2 weeks after the field went quiet, I took this tower and sealed the doors. Thick outer door, heavy inner frame, one stair to control. Boards went across the outer door first. Screws bit and held. A center bar sat at waist height with 2 bolts I could pull fast if I had to leave. Inside the hall, a second bar sat at knee height, plus a wedge under the jamb and a tote of gravel to kill sound. The stairwell was loud, so I made it mine. A steel cable from a roll-up door crossed the first landing at chest height. It hooked to 2 anchors and a carabiner I could pull with one hand. A yellow mark on the rail showed my stop. Spike boards waited 2 steps down. A seatbelt snare sat on the 3rd landing with the buckle propped open by a nail. Lights stayed low. One lamp aimed at the tread so the cab glass would not flare. Under the cab floor sat the elevator hatch. I covered it with shelves, 2 water crates, and a steel bar. A hinge bolt showed a crack, so I wrapped the bracket with a ratchet strap and ran a second bar across the frame. The glass panel above the hatch got a bookcase and a crate of bolts. Tools lived where my hands would land. Pry bar on the top step, tape, cord, and 3 zip ties in the left pocket, knife on the belt. The 12-gauge stayed on the floor by the hinge with the action open and 2 shells beside it, 1 banger and 1 buckshot. The .308 stayed zipped in its bag by the far window. I listened until small sounds blended into a steady bed. Then I ran the plan again. Wire, boards, snare, flood. If the hatch broke, use CO2 and fall back. If the door broke, pull the wire, drop the first one and reset. A faint tick started under the floor, short and steady. Killed the lamp, counted to 5 and turned it back on. The sound paused, then returned. Footsteps tapped the stair below, close to the wall. A head rose into the light and stopped. The mouth hung open. Skin looked dry around the lips. It gripped the rail, found the next step with the toe, and shifted weight forward like it had climbed here before. Not yet. One more step. A second shape showed behind the first, shoulder turned, lead hand high on the rail, quiet feet, stale breath. Closer, I said, and set my heel on the yellow tape. The first leaned into the wire. The cable pressed skin, then I pulled the carabiner and let it go. The wire snapped across and hit the first hard in the chest. It folded and hit the boards. The second stepped into the slack, caught the return on the throat, lost balance, and dropped into the snare. The strap closed and locked behind the knee. The spikes bit and held, waited for the kick. It came fast, one heel drumming, one hand clawing toward the step above. I put the pry bar on the shoulder and pushed down. Noise stayed small. Breath came rough through a bad nose. The board creaked once, then settled. Steps below answered the scuffle. More weight on the lower rail. 2, maybe 3. Set the cable again and braced. The hatch under the glass scraped once, longer this time. I kept the shotgun on the floor and watched the hands. A slow shape reached the next riser and paused at the edge of the light. I held the wire and watched the fingers. If the rail took weight, I would pull. If they rushed, I would kill the light and take the shotgun. I counted breaths to keep the pace even. The cable hummed against the anchor. I fixed on the rail. Boot soles scraped faint on concrete. Dust lifted and settled in the beam. One more step, I thought, then the pull. The next step creaked, and the one below it answered. 2 weeks ago, I took the tower and kept it. The field was quiet, so I moved fast and touched the parts that mattered. I parked behind the admin shed and killed the lights. I let dust drift past the mirror and watched the fence for a full minute. The gate arm hung crooked and the chain lay in dirt. I walked the line and checked for gaps and prints. Grass bent near the culvert and the soil showed dragged feet, which told me the ditch had traffic. I checked the terminal next. A vending machine lay on its face. Broken glass crunched under my boot. The tower had height, 1 stair, and doors I could brace, so I chose it. I pried the outer door with a flat bar, then cleared the lobby, the stairwell, and the cab. No voices, no hot metal, no smoke. A vest under a chair and a cap by the console said someone left fast. I locked the inner door, shoved a chair under the knob and blocked the outer door with the dead vending machine. I pulled a cart from the hanger and started a loop. Broken shelves became boards. Screws, tape, washers, a bucket of bolts and rags filled the bin. Water cases waited in the maintenance bay, so those went first and stacked into a low wall on the second floor. Each trip followed one rule: load, listen, move, stop and shade, listen again, then climb. I marked safe paths with tape. A strip at knee height ran from the door to the stair and up to the second floor. If power failed, I could crawl and follow tape and stay off glass. Loud grates got a white dot. Slick steps took a stripe. I tested the beacon pole by the access road. The box held a stiff switch. One flip proved the lamp still turned, slow and clean. I shut it off, logged the position, and marked it as a pull for later. I checked the siren mast at the lot edge. A hand crank sat in a steel cabinet. I taped the door so it would not rattle. 5 seconds on the handle threw sound over the ditch. I wrote a warning on orange tape: use in bursts, then move. I found power in a small breaker closet. I threw each switch one at a time. Half the lights worked. Most stayed off, and toggles got tape tails so fingers could find them in the dark. A box of batteries sat on a low shelf. I counted them twice. The radio took 4. The headlamp took 3. 2 fresh sets went in a zip bag on a nail by the stair. I set up water next. Roof drains fed 2 downspouts. I cut one and piped it into a barrel behind the hangar. Gravel and cloth built a filter. A thermometer told me when a boil had done its job. Time strips went on the barrel, so a glance gave the batch age. I sorted food: rice, beans, jerky, canned greens, and salt. Cans went by date, bulged ones into trash. A small sign over the stove read "No raw risk." I reinforced the elevator hatch in the cab floor. Shelves from a side room stacked across the glass. A steel bar crossed the frame and a second bar locked from the side. A ratchet strap wrapped the weak hinge. A tote of bolts sat on top as a tell. I laid out quiet tools next to loud tools: pry bar, hammer, wedges, tape, then the saw. The saw lived in a locked bin, so using it meant a choice. I opened a cabinet in the shed and found a shotgun, clean and oiled. 2 bangers, 4 buckshot, 2 slugs sat in a coffee can. A note on the stock said "Last Defense." It stayed by the hinge at the top of the first run. The .308 remained zipped with 10 rounds. I filled a sandbag with gravel on the roof and chalked a rest line. I managed noise. Rubber mats sat where shoes hit old metal and loose edges got tape. 2 vents carried small chimes made from washers on string. A thin line tied to a hook would ring a dry note when something crawled. At dusk, the cab window showed a dead field. Dust hung in the low spots. No shapes crossed the ditch. I walked the stair one more time, tugged each bar and strap, and counted shells in the can. The plan stayed simple: hold the stair, keep the door, and move only when sound outside moved away. Night settled with a slow draft through cracks. I sat with my back to the console and listened until small noises found their places. Quiet held long enough to believe the day had worked. Before light broke, a faint clatter ran along the chain, not wind. Dust lifted in a thin sheet beyond the culvert, then settled, then lifted again. That pattern meant feet. I put my hands on the rail and started the day. Morning gave me a clean line, so I walked the site and picked what stayed and what went. The tower stayed. 1 stair, heavy doors, clean angles. The terminal went dark unless parts were needed. Hangar A stayed as a tool source and fallback roof. Hangar B went off limits because the floor bowed. The admin shed stayed for fuel and hardware. Anything that rattled went. Inside the tower, I set zones: ground, entry, keep it clear. Second, food, water, rest. Third, radios and maps. Cab, watch and fight. Each zone got a short tape list. If a tool lived there, its name went on the tape. If something moved, a line crossed the name until it came back. Routes mattered more than rooms. One path ran from the door to the stair, another from the stair to water, a third from the stair to the roof hatch. Tape at knee height marked all three. Loud plates got a white dot. Hinges that cried got oil and a tape flag so any change showed. Rules came next. Short words, light low, doors barred, quiet first, count rounds, move tape, test plan, sleep turns, waste nothing, log changes, no hero moves. Light low meant red headlamp and one lamp on treads, not glass. Doors barred meant the inner bar stayed on unless I looked through it and the outer brace only came off for a load. Quiet first meant hand tools beat power tools and a pry bar beat a shot. Move tape meant shift the path when a mess built up and fix it before dark. Test plan meant run traps before night and reset what failed. Sleep turns meant set a timer and honor it. The stair got its own checklist. Cable set, carabiner ready, spike board straight, snare buckled, CO2 charged, bar tight on the hatch, shotgun staged. That list hung where my left hand landed at the first run. A pencil on a string marked a dot before last light. Noise traps sat where crawlers hid. 2 vents got washer chimes. The culvert mouth got a tin lid on a string under a grate, and one pull made it knock. If the lid rang without my pull, someone else was there. Water stayed simple. Roof downspout to barrel, barrel to pot, pot to jugs. A thermometer told me when a boil landed. Tape strips held time so a jug could be traced. Any jug that clicked went to trash. Any bulged lid went outside and got marked bad. Food stayed plain. Rice, beans, jerky, canned greens, salt, one pot at a time. A paper above the stove read no raw risk. If a can hissed wrong or smelled sweet, it left the building. Power stayed off unless needed. Breakers had tape tails so the right one could be flipped in the dark. A flashlight lived in the closet with spare batteries. The radio scanned on low. Weapons had simple roles. Rifle for distance, shotgun for stairs, pry bar for hands. 10 rounds sat with the rifle. 2 bangers and 6 buckshot stayed with the shotgun. Fire risk got its own line. Fuel capped. Rags in a metal can. No flames near the barrel. A rope hung by the cab with a knot every foot and gloves next to it. If smoke climbed the stair, the roof was first stopped. Waste went out. Cans, lids, and spoiled food moved to a pit 10 steps east of the shed. Ash from the pot went there too. Nothing soft stayed inside overnight. Each afternoon the fence got a walk. Prints by the culvert read best with light low to the ground. Drag marks told how many passed. Deep toes meant a fresh group. If the chain sang and stopped, it was wind. If it sang and then sang again, it was hands. Shelter in place only worked if the place was worth it, so the cable was pulled twice and 2 test weights dropped on the boards. Cuts showed clean. The snare closed on a sandbag and held. The pry bar levered a bucket and made a quiet thud. Every test had a reset, and each reset went on the card. At last light, a short log closed the day. What broke, what changed, what hurt. Mistakes got a name and a fix. The list stayed short and blunt. The last job each night was a slow circle of the cab. Windows checked, vents checked, radio off, headlamp on the hook, rifle zipped, shotgun staged, hatch bolts touched, bars tugged. Then a minute at the glass to watch the field and listen there. The next bend started with a smear on the beacon box and a print that did not match my boots. The first shout came at noon by the culvert. A man waved a white rag and kept both hands open. The fence rattled when he leaned in and then he stepped back. He did not run or claw. No head tilt. No bite marks I could see. Sweat ran down his neck. Dust covered his shirt. He looked at the windows. "Don't shoot," he said. "Name's Rafi." I stayed behind glass and watched his feet. No stutter steps, no ankle drag. A small pack rode his shoulder and a metal bottle hung from a strap. "Not sick," he said. "I can fix things." "You have power?" Rules said verify. I pointed to the dirt and held up 2 fingers. He nodded, set the pack down, and said, "Knife in the front pocket." The blade clinked on a rock. He lifted his shirt and turned once. No blood. The main gate stayed closed. I used the culvert path to a service gap with a crossbar. He waited 5 meters back. "Stay there," I said. Hands up. He raised them. You alone up there? He asked. Yes, I said. Why here? I asked. He glanced at the beacon pole and the siren box. Noise tools, he said. Height, 1 stair. Water first, I said. He held up the bottle, poured a splash, then wiped his mouth and hands with the cloth. The crossbar slid and the gap opened for one. Walk to the yellow tape and stop, I said. He walked to the mark and stopped. Turn around. He turned. Arms, back, neck, no wounds. Where from? I asked. Shops by the county road, he said. Garage. Any dead behind you today? I asked. 3 at the ditch, he said. I climbed the fence. He looked at the door. You did the boards right, he said. We moved toward the tower. He studied the stair and the cable across the first landing. That's your cut, he asked. Yes, I said. Don't touch it. He raised both hands. Understood, he said. You have a snare on the 3rd step? Yes. Add a strap at shin height, he said. On the 2nd floor, he waited by the door. Food first or work first, he asked. Work, I said. I'll pay in cans. Beans and salt, he said. We started at the breaker closet. He traced each run and pointed at a cracked insulator. That hum near dark, he said. It's this. I passed tape and a mat. He wrapped the bite, set the mat, and wrote, Don't lean when power is on. The beacon box came next. He checked the switch and set a paper wedge under the lid. If you want pulse control, he said, we can rig a cord. He tied paracord to the toggle and ran it to a post I could reach from cover. Short pulls, he said. At the siren mast, he reset a loose hinge pin with a nail and a nut. 5 seconds on, 30 off, he said. Back in the cab, he eyed the elevator hatch. Glass makes me nervous, he said. Me too, I said. Weight and a bar is what I have. He pointed at the side wall. Slide a shelf into that slot, he said. If something hits from below, it jams tighter. We cut 2 boards and made a brace. On the stair, he checked the anchors and tested the carabiner. Smooth, he said. Set your heel on that mark and pull clean? Yes, I said. Then a 2nd anchor higher helps your reset, he said. We added a bolt and ran the drill with a sandbag. The wire hit, the bag fell, and the strap caught it. Vents got new washer chimes. Old string phrase, he said. This will ring tomorrow. We took a short break. Payment after last light, I said. 2 cans and a bottle. He nodded. Salt if you can spare it. Why no group? I asked. Tried one, he said. Rules slipped. He looked at the taped path. You wrote rules. An hour before dusk, he asked to walk the fuel farm. If they come, they smell this first, he said. The tank stood behind a fence. We kept to cover and watched the dust. Footprints crossed the gravel in 3 places, 2 sets deep, 1 light. They circled and then left, he said. We followed the prints to the culvert. A black smear on concrete marked a knee hit. Not yours, he said. Wrong boot. The ditch mouth pushed cool air. A knock under the grate answered the weight shift. Chime works, I said. Back at the tower, he looked steady. You want a shift? I asked. 2nd half of the night, he said. I can sit quiet. You get the stair on first contact, I said. If anything moves wrong, you fall back and I pull. He nodded. Payment, I said. 2 cans slid across the crate and a small bag of salt followed. He packed them and stood. If you need me at the fence, hang a white rag, he said. Light fell and the field went flat. We watched the chain barely move. The plan stayed simple. Hold the stair. Hold the door. The first test of us as a pair came 2 hours after dark, and it started with the snare line twitching once, then twice. We built the line the next morning and made the stair our center. Rafi walked the rail with a marker and tapped the spots that took force. Anchor here and here, he said. I drilled and set bolts while he cut 2 plates from a shelf bracket. The carabiner sat where my hand could find it without looking. A 2nd anchor 1 step higher gave a fast reset. Spike boards came first. Pallet planks, long screws, and washers made rows of teeth. We set one on the first landing and another halfway up the second run, each hid under a strip of cardboard so dust covered the points and tape marked a safe step for me. The snare got a second strap at shin height. Seatbelt webbing ran to a buckle propped with a nail, and a short line tied to the rail let me rip it tight. Rafi leaned back on a sandbag. "Good bite," he said. Noise control stayed a theme. We taped loose plates and set rubber mats where soles squealed. A string of small washers hung inside a vent like a dry chime. If anything crawled, that sound would carry. Tools sat on a shelf by the first turn: pry bar, hammer, tape, wedges, cord. Loud tools slept in a bin behind the door with a note that said, "Ask yourself twice." Roots needed clean logic. One path led from the door to the stair. Another ran from the stair to storage and water. The third ran up to the cab and the roof hatch. Tape at knee height marked all three, and arrows at ankle height pointed home. At the beacon box, he tied a cord to the switch and routed it through a guide on the post. 2 short pulls gave a single turn. 4 pulls made 2 turns. The siren mast got the same treatment. A painted mark on the crank showed 5 seconds. 5 on, 30 off, then move. We cut boards for the inner door and added a second brace that dropped in with a hook. If the outer door failed, that inner brace would buy a minute. Outside, the culvert mouth needed a plan. The grate rattled when wind shifted, which made bad signals at night. We tied a small line under the lid so I could set it once to mark my own noise. Anything that rang twice without my pull was not wind. The fuel farm sat quiet in heat. Tanks stood behind mesh with faded signs. We walked the perimeter and marked 2 straight lines in dust. If a crowd formed, those lines showed how far sound would carry. We tested with a banger from the shotgun fired into empty field away from the tanks. 1 shot buys a short window, then pulls trouble. On the roof, we built a rest for the rifle. 2 sandbags on a folded tarp sat behind the hatch. Chalk lines marked a prone spot. A small box held 10 rounds and a rag. Rule was clear: no shots unless a person put fire to fuel or tried the door with a torch. By noon, the stair felt like a machine. Cable-armed, boards hidden, snare reset, tools staged. We ran the drill with sandbags and a dummy made from coveralls and jugs. Each time the wire hit first, the board stopped feet and the strap finished it. Reset took under 10 seconds. Rafi checked the breaker closet and flagged 2 fuses that ran hot. "Flip with care," he said. We left most lights off and kept 1 lamp on the treads. Heat pushed a shimmer over the runway. Rafi turned a bolt. "You going to keep this place alone?" he asked. "Not if someone useful shows up," I said. "Then I need a job," he said. "You have one," I said. "Hold second shift and fix what hums." He nodded. "Walk the fence," he said. We took the tape line out back and stayed in shadow. The chain lay still. The culvert draft felt cold, a sign of pull through the pipe. "They use this at night," he said. "We should set straps in the pipe." "After dark," I said. Back inside, we stacked 2 more shelves over the hatch glass and tightened the strap on the weak hinge. A chalk mark at the corner showed movement at a glance. I ran the list with my left hand: wire, carabiner, boards, snare, CO2, bar, shotgun. Dusk brought the first test of our build. The washer chime in the vent rang once, then went still. We both watched the grate. 1 more dry ring, then a soft scrape that did not match wind. Air felt colder through grate. Dust lifted in beam. "Hold stair," I said. Rafi set his shoulder at the inner door. I put a heel on the yellow tape and closed my hand on the carabiner. The sound moved up the vent and stopped. When it started again, it came from the dark under the hatch. A knuckle tapped glass, once then twice. Wind shifted while Rafi reset the snare and I tuned with the volume low. Band 4 carried a looped warning. Band 5 stayed dead, and Band 6 hissed, cleared, then hissed again before a steady voice asked if K17 copied. I answered that K17 copied and asked her to repeat slowly. She told me to shift 2 steps left. I moved the knob until hiss eased. She said better and gave her name as Lena. She said she was by the water tower with a set and could see our beacon pole from the ridge. I asked if she was alone. She said yes. I asked how far. She said close enough to see the cracked north pane. I asked who she had traveled with. She said family, then said she was the last. I asked what she needed. She said fence access and a safe way in and that she could keep watch. I told her hold position and tell me what she could see without moving. She read the field clean. 2 hangars, 1 bowing on the south wall, a siren mast, fuel tanks, a chain gate, a culvert by a tree. I asked what she heard. She said the chain sang once and stopped, then sang again with a thin echo that did not sound like wind. Rafi tapped the culvert on our map and said crawlers would use it after dark. I told Lena to hold for our signal. We moved to the roof and saw a figure by the water tower ladder. I told her stay still until we cleared the ditch. The chain sang again. A face slid into culvert light, then another. I told Rafi 5 seconds on the siren. He cranked and stopped. Sound rolled and died. The pair froze. Another burst turned 3 bodies toward the mast and pulled them under the road. I told Lena move to the culvert mouth, stay high, and wait at the fence. She said moving and kept the set low. We took the fence path, opened the crossbar, and I stood at the yellow tape under the low tree. A narrow face watched back. I asked if she was Lena and she said yes. I told hands up. She raised them. I asked about cuts and fever. She said no. I told her drop the radio. She set it down and stepped back. She walked to the tape and turned and held still. A quick check showed nothing fresh, only a small dry burn on one wrist. We crossed at the culvert while the echo held. The grate rattled. A hand slid on bars below. Our steps stayed quick to the door. The door took a tug and a bar drop. Then we were inside. On the 2nd floor, I told her sit and drink. She said thank you. I asked why this place. She said it looked held. I asked if she could run the set without chatter. She said yes. She could log times and read back short changes. I assigned the 3rd floor desk. She said copy and climbed. From the window, I checked the culvert and saw 1 head pressed to the grate and a second tap the lid. Rafi asked if we should pull the siren. I said not yet. Lena said 6 was clear and 4 looped north. I told her log it. Dusk reached the glass, the chain sang twice. The grate lifted a finger and settled. Floor air cooled like a door opened below. Lena said she heard hands on the ladder. We looked at the hatch and set the lights to low. The wire hung ready, the snare lay open, the bar crossed the frame. I told her lower lights. The first knock came and the second answered. I told Rafi hold the stair and set heel on the mark. I took the carabiner and waited while the rhythm climbed toward the last rung. A hand found a rung and paused. Another found the next. The sound under the hatch tracked it, beat for beat. Lena said 4 had gone silent and 6 carried only us. I told report in 5 words. She said 2 rungs, same pace, clear. I killed the hall lamp. The tapping reached the last rung and stopped. A breath scraped low, the glass flexed under weight. I told Rafi get ready and wait for my pull. The first bolt creaked and then held. I lifted cable slack. A palm slapped glass and slid. The shelf shifted a hair and settled. I told Lena mark time and hold the channel. We waited for the next move and it came from the stair below. The next sound came from below. We held our breath and waited there. Night sits close when we test the quiet plan. Rafi checks the stair and leaves the shotgun on the hinge. Lena notes the time on a card and drops the red filter on her lamp. I carry tape, 2 straps, and the CO2 unit. The back door opens on a breath, then shuts with cloth in the latch. We take the shadow line to the ditch. Tape at knee height keeps the path true. No wind, only the hiss from the culvert mouth. Count steps, I said. 12 to the lip, then 2 down. Rafi goes first with the pry bar. Lena holds the seatbelt webbing and the buckle with the nail in it. I shoulder the CO2 and take a thin cord. The plan stays simple. Set 2 snares inside at knee height, tie the tails to anchors, bait with a sound, and fall back to listen. At the lip, I test the grate. It moves one finger and rings once. Rafi sets a wedge so it cannot slam. Lena feeds the strap around a rib and passes the buckle to me. Pull to the mark, I said. She pulls and holds. I slip the pin and the loop forms a noose. The tail runs to a bolt hole and ties off tight. Second strap, I said. Rafi threads it under the first and hands me the buckle. I set this loop a hand lower for a knee, then tie to a second hole. The loops hang open, hard to see even with the lamp. Lena adds a washer thread so any touch makes a dry chime. We place the bait, a small tin on a pebble 2 meters in. A short line tied to the tin runs to my hand. When I pull, the tin clicks. We back up to the lip. Test one, I said, and give the line a tug. The tin clicks once. We wait. Nothing moves. Test two, I said. 2 clicks now. Spaced a heartbeat apart. Air shifts. Dust rolls. A scrape starts deep, slow and steady. Back 5, I said. We step back and hold. The scrape grows and splits into 2. One sound drags, one taps. Rafi whispers, left hand, right hand. The first touch hits the washer thread and rings. A second touch rings again. The lead shape reaches the first loop and stops. The second bumps the first and pushes it forward. The top loop tightens. The lower loop bites a knee. A pull shakes dust and a heel thumps twice. Hold, I said. The thread rings a third time and then goes quiet. Both shapes fight the webbing and burn energy on steel. We wait until motions slow to small jerks. Time, I said. Lena whispers 90 seconds from first scrape to first bite. I nod and pull the CO2 pin. Short blast and back. The nozzle goes in low. Cold air floods the pipe with a roar. I keep the blast short and count 5. Rafi hauls the snares tight and hard locks the buckles. A hand slaps concrete, then slides. The thread does not ring. Move, I said. We reset the grate, cover the lip with a rag and take the tape path home. Then the door closes soft and the inner bar drops. On the second floor we listen. No chain song, no echo. Lena writes the order. Bait, scrape, ring, bite, blast. Run 2? She asked. Yes, I said. We wait 20 minutes. Rafi wipes frost from the nozzle. The second run mirrors the first. 2 clicks, 2 scrapes, ring, bite, blast. This time the fight ends quicker. 70 seconds, Lena said. We do not pull trophies, we do not drag bodies, the pipe can keep them. Back in the cab, I log the test and the rule it proves. Quiet works if bait is soft and bursts stay short. Straps beat shots, gas beats shouting. We arm the stair and brace the hatch, and we sleep in turns with the radio on low. Just before dawn, the washer thread on the 3rd floor vent rings once, then stops, and the hatch under the cab answers with a slow scrape. Midday heat pressed on the glass when the knock came at D entry. 3 short taps, pause, 1 more, not a scrape. Controlled. Rafi looked over the rail. I set the wire to ready. Lena kept the radio low. The knock came again, same pattern. We used the back path. Tape ran from the stair to the shed and a long shadow to the door marked D. The outer bar sat firm, no fresh pry marks. I set my ear to the steel. A man said, "Don't shoot!" "Step back and speak up," I said. "Name is Boone," he said. "Worked site security. Came back after the road closed. I have a card and a key for inner locks. Hands where I can see them." He raised them above the glass strip. Sun showed scars and a badge clip on his vest. "Alone?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "Car died at the pump house." "Back to the paint mark," I said. "Drop the belt in the pack." He did. The belt hit with a clink. "What's on the belt?" I asked. "Keys and a small radio," he said. "No gun. Turn around." Neck, ears, hands, elbows. 1 scrape on a forearm, dry and flaked. "Open the pouch," I said. He held up a ring of keys, a folded map, 2 batteries, and a plastic tag with K17 in red. The radio came out next. "Dead battery," he said. Items went through the slot. Tag matched the site, keys matched the locks, map showed the culvert grid. State your job, I said. Night rounds and gate control, he said. I know the breaker closet, the roof hatch, and the water tower ladder. Why come here? I asked. Fence is tall, doors are thick, and the mast is high, he said. We needed a man who knew the site. We did not need a mistake at the hinge. Walk to the yellow tape and stop, I said, then sit and hold your hands out. The bar lifted. Rafi set a spike board behind me. The door opened a palm, then a boot, then a shoulder. Boone stepped to the tape and sat. His eyes found the wire on the stair and stayed there. Any contact today? I asked. 3 at the culvert before dawn, he said. Why not the terminal? I asked. Floor is open and doors are weak, he said. We kept him on the 2nd floor and checked again. No bites, no wet cuts, no fever. He drank slow and kept his eyes off the food. You will work if you stay, I said. Understood, he said. Work started with a walk. Boone moved like he had done rounds. He put his hand on the rail where paint had worn thin. Old test here, he said at one bolt. At the breaker closet, he named lines before I read them. This feeds the mast, he said. This runs the admin strip. On the roof, he pointed at a chalk scuff. Wind shifts here, he said. If you shoot from this corner, grit hits the glass. He lay behind the sandbag and checked height with his hands. Good rest, he said. Back at D-entry, he showed a brace trick. Swap the drop hook for a loop, he said. If the bar falls under stress, the loop catches the weight. He cut a strip from a shelf, drilled 2 holes, and made the loop in 5 minutes. Lena asked about the Siren. Boone answered 5 on, 30 off, without looking. Rafi lifted an eyebrow. I watched his hands. No shake. By late afternoon, he earned a small share. 1 can of beans, a pinch of salt, water twice. I put him on a short leash. You take the stair on 2nd contact, I said. If the wire fails, fall back and I pull. Copy, he said. At dusk, we tested him. The chime in the 3rd floor vent rang once, then twice. He went to the mark and set his heel. The first shape hit the wire and dropped. The second fell into the snare. Boone did not swing blind. He waited for the kick to stop and reset the cable clean. Trust moved a notch. Band 6 woke. Lena said, short call. A man asks for fuel. Boone looked toward the tanks. Fuel farm, he said. We took the roof. 3 shapes stood by the mesh. 1 man held a can and a lighter. The lighter clicked twice and failed. Warn once, I said. I keyed the radio on low power. Step away from the tanks, I said. No open flame near fuel. The man lifted the can and the lighter again. He will try again, Boone said. The lighter caught on the 3rd click. Then he smiled once. We planned the night in short lines and simple moves. All 4 of us sat on the 2nd floor with the door barred and the stair armed. I drew a map on cardboard. Short bursts, long pauses, no hero runs. The beacon would pull, the siren would steer, and the stair would hold if anything circled back. Rafi tied a knot on the beacon cord so my hand could find it in the dark. Lena wrote times and underlined the 30-second rest after each siren hit. Boone leaned on the rail and watched the field. We kept it plain. I said the goal so we heard it the same way. We moved the crowd east and open a lane west to the water tower. If it holds 10 minutes, we set 1 more culvert snare. If it fails, we fall back and pull the wire until the steps go quiet. Lena asked how long to run the beacon. I said 2 pulls, count 5, 2 pulls again, then stop. Rafi said 5 on the siren with the same rest. Boone asked who watched the tanks. I said I would from the roof while he held the stair. Before dark, I walked the loop and touched what mattered. The inner brace sat true. Spike boards lay flat. The snare buckle clicked clean. A mark on the wall showed where the wire would cross. Small fixes save time when hands shake. We ate 2 mouthfuls each and drank slow. Then we took places. Boone stood at the first landing with the shotgun at low ready. Rafi waited by the siren crank. Lena watched Band 6. I lay behind the sandbag on the roof and kept eyes on the tanks and fence. Dusk pulled color out of the field. The cord to the beacon ran to a post at my left hand. I tapped twice and felt the knot. The plan started there. The first pull turned the beacon once and swept the gravel. Shadows leaned and slid. I counted 5, pulled again and watched dust lift from the access road. 3 figures by the chain turned toward the light. "Beacon 2, complete," I said. "Stand by for Siren." Rafi cranked 5 seconds and stopped. Sound rolled and fell. The 3 froze, then drifted toward the mast. A 4th came out of the culvert and followed. "Hold," I said. "Eyes on tanks." Nothing moved by the mesh, no lighters, no lanterns. I pulled the beacon for 2 more turns and stopped. The group near the chain moved east in a slow line. Lena said the channel was clear. 9 east of the culvert, she said. 2 near the gate. We held the pattern. Siren 5, rest 30. Beacon 2 pulls, rest. Each round added weight to the east side until the west opened into a clean gap. "Lane is open," I said. "Culvert team, go." Rafi moved with the pry bar. Lena followed with the strap. I covered them from the roof. They slid to the lip, set the wedge so the grate would not slam, looped the strap at knee height, tied the tail to the bolt hole, and set the washer thread. "Back out," I said. They climbed in shadow and came under the low tree. The gap held. Boone whispered that the stair was clean. I told him keep his heel on the mark and not to chase. He said copy. A new sound rolled from the road. Tires on gravel, engine low. A pickup eased between the tanks and went dark. 2 men stepped out. One held a can, the other a torch. The torch man looked at the chain and then at the beacon pole. He lifted the head and smiled. "Do not light the torch," I said on low power. "Step away from the tanks." The can man pointed at the tower and shouted. The torch man clicked once, twice. I held the aim on the torch head. 1 shot would break the tool, but it could bend the lane. I counted heartbeats. "Last warning," I said. The striker sparked and caught a thin blue lick. "Fire," Lena said, and I pressed the trigger. The torch head blew apart and the man fell with his hand over his face. The can man grabbed the can, ran for the truck, stalled it, then got it moving and reversed out. No flame touched the tanks. Down in the ditch, the crowd paused, then held when the siren rolled again. Rafi cranked 5 and stopped. I pulled the beacon twice and pushed the glow east. The bodies turned that way, slow and empty. "Lane still open?" I said. "Reset and hold." Boone called that the wire was ready and the snare had fresh marks. Lena logged the shot and marked the time in red. Rafi said the crank felt warm. I told him rest it longer between hits. The truck did not come back. The field eased into full dark. For 10 minutes, the plan ran clean. "Run the beacon 1 more time," I said. I pulled the knot twice. Light swept the fence, the access road, and the old gate. It also washed across the admin shed and showed a pale circle on the wall that had not been there. "Hold," I said. "What is on the shed?" Lena said a door opened, then closed. Boone said he heard a latch at ground level. Rafi said he smelled fuel in the hall. I told them stay tight. The shed door opened again, wider. A shadow moved along the wall toward de-entry. It kept low and quick and stayed between sweeps. I raised the rifle, then lowered it. The angle was wrong. "Boone," I said. "Visitor to de-entry." He said the bar was set and the spike board sat behind the hinge. I told him no shots unless the door failed. He said copy and set his heel on the mark. The shadow reached the last strip of concrete and stopped. A hand touched metal and pulled back. The beacon swept once more and showed a face turned up toward the glass. The face was awake and not sick. It was Keller. He smiled and lifted a key toward the lock. Time was running out. Keller showed a key at de-entry like he owned the hinge, and I told Boone hold the bar and say nothing. He tapped metal, smiled, and asked to trade. I said not at this door and not tonight. He rolled the key, said open for 10 minutes, and said we all walk away richer. Lena said 2 engines faded east. I said log it. Keller pressed the key to the slot, showed a bow stamp that matched the sight, and said this slides your inner locks and saves time. I said the boards made that key a toy, and that if he pushed here, he would meet the wire and the spike boards and the snare and then the cold air. He said talk at the fuel farm at first light, bring salt in a can, leave the rifle. Then he backed away and the door went still. Night ran out in short bursts and rests. The lane stayed open. No trucks came. Gray light found us on the roof with eyes on the tanks. Prints cut the gravel, some deep and some light. We read the ground before we moved. No one touched the gate until a path home was set. Rafi pointed at a dark stripe where a can had leaked. Lena drew a grid. Boone held the shotgun low. By the west tank, deep toes and a loose heel said the driver ran. A dust arc said the can swung wide. 3 other sets broke apart and circled back. One small pair cut left to the culvert, one dragged a toe and went right to the mast, and one took a straight line to D-entry. I said the small feet were a scout, and the straight line was Keller. Boone said the rightward track moved like a bad knee. At the mesh gate, a heel stamp held a letter cut into rubber. A bolt cap bore a smear. We walked the outside and checked wind. No smoke, no fuel smell. The sweep went culvert, mast, shed. At the culvert, a scuff on the lip showed someone watched the tower from the low tree. By the mast, a small pile of match heads sat in dust. Rafi said striker test. The shed wall showed a circle where the beacon swept. Below it, a hand had pressed dust to test reach. Back inside, we made a table where they stood, what they touched, what they want. Lena said fuel, salt, and a foot in the door. Rafi said Siren and beacon too. Boone said Keller wanted control more than cans. I said use the farm as a mirror. We built a quiet trap that would not touch a tank. Rafi laid 2 fuel rags in a shallow trench between mesh and service road. I tied a fuse of cloth to a heat pack and set a short delay. It would roll a low sheet of flame for 20 seconds with dirt on both sides to keep it narrow. A second strip lay under empty drums so smoke would hide our move from tower to shed and back. No heat near caps, no sparks on valves. We added a pull line on the mesh latch so it would drop closed if someone opened it wide, and a tiny bell to ring once. Lena inked the lane and wrote smokescreen. Boone said he would hold the stair and not chase. I said we would meet Keller, but we would pick spot and time and bring no salt and no can. Day stayed quiet. Band 6 hissed. Band 4 looped. At last light, a head rose behind the west tank. Keller looked at the tower and raised a hand, then pointed at gravel where new prints braided old ones into a tight line. The braid ran to D-entry. Rafi said he wants the door and wants us to watch. Lena said 2 more stood by the gate. Boone said choose. I set the sandbag under the stock. The angle to Keller was clean to the berm. The angle to the gate was not. I said talk at the line, not the door. We moved along shadow to the service gap. Keller waited outside the mesh with empty hands. He said trade fuel for salt and safe passage to the road. I said safe passage starts with closed cans and a lighter on the dirt, and said the road east was clear if he walked. He said he would walk if we opened once, and said his people would hold. Behind him, the braid of prints turned toward the shed. I told Rafi now. He pulled the cord. A low sheet of flame rolled the trench and smoked the drums. The bell rang once. Keller stepped back, raised both hands, and said easy. I said the road is that way and the tower is not a store. He stared through heat and said we would see each other again. Walked the line he had shown, and his people faded with him. Smoke covered us while we came home. Dust drew a line across the service road while we kept the tower dark and the plan simple, and I knew Keller would try again, for now anyway. Rafi checked the siren crank with a light turn. Lena logged bands with short times, and Boone watched the stair with his heel on the tape. Lena caught 2 voices on 6 that were close but not calling us. She listened and said they were counting steps around the tanks. Keller walked out with one hand up while 2 men split right and left and hugged shadow. He stopped by the west cylinder and pointed at the mast. He said they would leave at dusk if the road was clean and the mesh stayed quiet. I answered that the road was clean and no doors would open. Rafi whispered the crank had 3 clean bursts left. Lena said 4 looped the same warning. and Boone said the stair and wire were ready. Keller lifted both hands like peace and said cross without tricks and we live to the weekend. I said leave now and you live to the week after that. 2 men dragged a pallet toward the gate while a third tested wind with a lighter he did not strike. We needed a move that would not send splash toward the tanks, so I told Boone hold and not chase. Told Rafi stand by and told Lena keep time straight. Keller tapped the mesh and looked up. He said open and we clear this place. I said leave and you clear it faster. The lighter flicked toward the trench without ignition. I said 5 on the siren. Rafi cranked and stopped and sound rolled and died across the ditch. Bodies near the culvert turned to the whale. Keller watched and said we were feeding our fence. I said steering noise, pulled the beacon twice and let it coast. More heads turned east and the lane west opened. Then the shed door eased and a figure slipped out with a can and a rag. Runner, Lena said. The face was a kid. The wet rag moved toward the can and Keller watched without speaking. I aimed at the can and not the kid and told the yard drop the fuel. He looked to Keller. Keller gave a small go and I took the wrist shot. The can hit the fence and rolled while the rag fell and did not catch. His men grabbed him and hauled him behind the tank. I told them leave the gate and the cans. Keller told them hold the gate and the bell at the mesh rang once. Boone said the stair stayed clear. Rafi said the crank would give one more burst and Lena said 6 woke with a faint man's voice that repeated fire. A match scraped by the east tank and hands and a small box drew close to metal. Keller stepped back. I said don't, and I pressed the trigger before the striker found steel. The box shattered and a man screamed. Sound carried and turned 3 heads. Rafi hit the siren and killed it on the count. I pulled the beacon twice and pushed light east. Keller yelled about turns. I told him walk while you still can. 2 shapes slid by the mesh and cover. The bell rang again and the latch levered hard against our pull line and the pallet shoved forward until it stuck. Stay off the gate, I said on low power. No one listened and the mesh swung and caught on our line. I fired into the pallet edge so splinters jumped and the shove slowed. The pause lasted 1 breath and then the push started again and Rafi said 1 siren burst left. I told him wait until the lane bent toward the mast. Lena said 3 bodies left the ditch and turned toward the noise, and Boone did not lift his heel. Keller told the mast to cut the pull line. A knife flashed, the bell chimed and stopped, and I said now, for the last burst. Rafi cranked and the whale soaked the lot. The 3 in the ditch trotted past the gate toward the mast and the beacon swept the pallet twice. Keller blinked in the strobe while the blade sliced again. The pull line parted and the gate began to open and my choice narrowed to 2 moves. I could shoot into the hinge and jam the mesh and risk a ricochet toward a tank or hold 1 breath longer and use the trench flame as a wall. I counted fast and picked the move that would not light steel or paint. Rafi watched for the signal. Lena logged and Boone kept eyes on the stair. The gate rolled wider while the pallet carved an arc in dust. I raised the rifle a finger and settled on wood so the round would drive boards and not metal. I said stand back from the gate and Keller pretended he could not hear. Then I pressed the trigger and wood blew out and the push stopped again. The pause gave 1 breath to work with. I counted 3 and pointed at the cord that fed the trench. Rafi nodded and Lena said 4, looped a new warning. The knife flashed for the last cut and the gate started to open again. The pallet shoved for all it had left, and I reached for the cord that would light the trench and throw a smoke wall. The trench burned low and hid faces for a minute, then wind bent smoke away from the mesh. We killed the siren, stopped the beacon and held. Keller backed off and slid into the ditch. We shut the door, dropped the inner bar and climbed. On the 2nd floor, Boone checked boards and set his heel on tape. Rafi wiped his hands and said the crank was hot. Lena logged the last burst and closed the radio so we could hear the stair. I walked the turns and touched each trap. Wire armed, snare open, spikes flat, CO2 charged, hatch bars tight. The first sound came from under the cab. Not wind, not pipes. A measured tap, skin on steel, 4 beats and a pause. Rafi said 2 sets. I said, lights low and voices lower. We set one lamp on the treads and killed the rest. My boot found the yellow mark and my hand closed on the carabiner. Boone stood a step behind with the shotgun at low ready. A hand slid into view under the glass. The palm was torn. Fingers found a rung and held. A second hand matched pace. The shelf shifted a hair. The ratchet strap groaned and sat still. Count, I said. Lena said 2 hands, 6 seconds per rung. The next lift brought a face. Eyes failed to track light. The mouth hung open, it pressed. The glass bowed a finger. Boone raised the muzzle and stopped when I shook my head. Wire first, I said. He said he would wait. The sound under the glass climbed a rung and paused. The stair below answered, a faint shoe on concrete, a slow draw of breath against the wall. 2 fronts. Rafi whispered the vent chime on 3 had rung once. I told him hold the hall and keep the CO2 tight. Job split clean. Rafi took the 3rd floor bend with the extinguisher. Boone kept the first landing. Lena called times in 5 words. I would pull and reset. A knuckle knocked twice. The bolt head clicked. The shelf nudged. I pulled the carabiner. The cable snapped as a head came into light. The first in the stair took it in the chest and went down on the boards. The second stepped into slack, caught the return on the throat and dropped into the snare. The strap bit behind the knee. A heel kicked twice and slowed. Boone did not fire. He waited, reset the wire with both hands and set his heel again. Under the glass, the hands did not stop. The last rung took weight. The hinge creaked. The strap across the corner held but bowed. Lena said rung reached, pressure high. Bar, I said. Rafi slid a pry bar between shelf and frame and leaned in. The bow stopped. The palm left a print and came back harder. Something new joined the sound. A scrape from the shaft wall, slower than the hands, like a body shoved by others. I told Lena mark it and stepped back. The stair gave a second wave. 3 shapes in single file, hands on the rail. Boone waited until the lead toe crossed the line. I pulled. The cable took the first at the shoulder. The second fell on the spikes. The third tripped and hit the riser with a teeth click. Rafi said now and cracked the CO2. Cold air flooded the bend. The second wave stalled in white fog. We reset fast. The hatch groaned. The strap creaked 2 notes at its limit. The print on the glass smeared and slid. I drove the second bar into the slot Rafi had cut the first week. New taps, left side, Lena said. Lamp shifted. A third hand worried the hinge where the strap wrapped bad steel. Shotgun on glass is dumb, Boone said. We take the stair and trust the brace. He was right. A slug could crack what we still needed. I told him hold and count. The next shove had weight but no aim. The bracket groaned and held. The shelf walked a finger and stopped against the bookcase. I palmed the bar and drove down. The stack settled. The hands slid. A nail left a brown line and went. Silence lasted 1 breath. Then a clank rose from deep below the ladder, not hands but metal on frame. A length of pipe hit in a slow beat. Rafi swore softly and said they were pushing someone up. Lights off, listen, I said. The lamp died. We let sounds separate. Pipe beat, 4, pause, 4. Hands matched it. The stair below us stayed quiet. Beacon, Boone said, pull them east. Not yet, I said. We move sound we can control. Lena said the chain sang once and stopped. The fence was waking. We had to choose. I kept a hand on the wire and watched the hinge. Rafi waited with the lever. Boone adjusted his stance and took a slow breath so his arms would not shake. Lena set the radio low and kept her pencil ready. On my pull, I said. Hands pushed hard. The bracket chirped. The glass bowed and snapped back. I pulled the carabiner and the cable flashed. The stair went loud with bodies again, and the hatch did not break. Not yet, it would try again. We held the line. Smoke thinned until the chain ticked in the wind. 1 move left that did not trade the tower for a fire. Kill the glow, hide the heat, leave a cold shell, and walk. We set rolls. Rafi killed the breaker and pulled the siren fuse. Lena stripped the radio to minimum and packed the log. Boone held the stair with the shotgun. I dropped beacon control, planted a small timer in the shed, and met Rafi at the culvert for the exit. Gear stayed plain. Red headlamps, 1 spare battery set each, water tape, 2 straps, the CO2 unit, knives on belts. The rifle stayed zipped. Nothing that clicked. Watches synced. 5 minutes to break down, 5 to darken, 5 to move. If clocks drifted, the mesh bell spoke. 1 ring pause, 2 run, 3 climb. I tied a 10-minute timer to a cheap LED under a bucket with the bell string under the lip. When it wound down, the light would leak and the bell would ring, and whoever watched the yard would drift left. Not a win, just a nudge. Rafi dropped the breaker and the hall dimmed. He pulled the fuse and locked the cabinet. Lena wrote 3 lines and tore the page. Boone listened at the hatch and said the taps were steady and slow, which meant hands held a rung. The back path took me to the shed. Gravel snapped once and dust settled. I came home in shade. Phase 2 started. Lamps fell to red. Tape at knee height kept the route true. The hatch groaned once and went still. Far off, a door banged, then the field emptied again. "Time," I said, and we moved. Boone stayed at the first landing and pointed at the wire. Lena passed with the log under her arm and said Band 6 was dead and 4 had gone quiet. Rafi carried the fuse and said, "Meet me at the ditch." I set the inner bar, checked the outer boards, eased the back door shut with cloth in the latch, and hung a white rag on the fence as a home mark if we had to circle. The culvert breathed cold. The washer thread rang once when the grate flexed. We set 2 fresh snares inside the pipe, knee and shin tails tied to bolt holes. Rafi held the pry bar. Lena kept the pencil in her teeth. Boone watched our backs with the muzzle low. The timer ticked faintly when I stopped to listen. It helped. "Move," I said. We slid into the pipe and kept hands clear of sawed edges. Air smelled like dust and old concrete. A scrape echoed from behind, slow and careful. The first loop hung black. Halfway in, the mesh bell rang twice. The timer had done its job, or Keller had found the bucket. Either way, eyes were on the shed and not on us. We kept going. At the far grate we waited. 1 push raised it an inch. I laid tape on the rim so felt would muffle metal. Rafi slid out first, then Lena, then Boone. I came last and set the grate tight. The water tower gave us the ring. We climbed to the first band and lay behind steel. A pale bloom lit the bucket when the timer broke and the bell swung. Figures drifted left, not toward the culvert. We held still and let the place cool. 5 minutes, 10, 20, no siren, no beacon, only the chain ticking. Boone asked how long we kept the perch. Rafi said until the ladder stopped talking. Lena said the log ended with this. I watched the tower hold its dark. We had turned a bright box into a shadow. "You ready?" I asked him. Rafi said yes. Lena said yes. Boone nodded once. We climbed down and crossed the ditch and stayed on the service road. The tower sat behind us, small and black against the lot, and the fence line bent away. No one followed. We kept the stair. We kept the door. We kept each other moving. That was the job and the cost. The night took the rest. Enough. If you enjoyed the story and want part 2, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. See you in the next one.